On this week's 51%, it's all about healthy living. We sit down with the hosts of the podcast, Food We Need to Talk, to learn about the science and history behind dieting and your metabolism. And we hear from nutritionist Marisa Moore about how you can incorporate more whole foods in every meal.
Maybe add a little vegetable here, add a little fruit there, swap this or that out. And it's not a situation where you feel like you have to overhaul your diet overnight.
I'm Jessie King. It's all up next on 51%.
I was standing around like one of those girls I had seen in a movie. The whole world was a movie back then. I had my sunglasses on, I wanted to be seen without seeing shy Lolita. I wasn't really in it, I didn't really get it.
You're listening to 51%, a WAMC production dedicated to women's issues and experiences. Thanks for joining us. I'm Jessie King. Today we bring you a pair of no-nonsense interviews on healthy living. There will be no lose-weight quick tricks, magic diets, or products to sell on this week's show, so if that's what you're looking for, I'm sorry. And I think it's important to note that getting healthy does not always equate to losing weight. Everyone's personal health goals are different. But if you're looking to start exercising more or to eat a little healthier, whatever your reason, today's guests are here to help. Our main guests are the hosts of the podcast, Food We Need to Talk, and they just released a new in-depth book with the same name. Juna Gjata is a graduate from Harvard University with a degree in cognitive neuroscience and music, while Dr. Edward Phillips is an associate professor of physical medicine and rehabilitation at Harvard Medical School and the founder of the Institute of Lifestyle Medicine. Together, with personal anecdotes and humor, they've been tackling the big food questions, namely what we should eat and do, what we should avoid, how it impacts us, and how we can make peace with our bodies. Gjata says we're so inundated with unsolicited advice and merchandise online that sometimes the biggest hurdle is just getting the basic facts and science. And that's what they're here for.
There's so much kind of controversy, it seems like, in the news about what diet is best. And if you have social media, like this person says keto is the best, and this person says you should eat only meat, and this person says no meat, and all these things. And actually, if we look at the dietary guidelines over the past 50 or so years, they really haven't changed that much. And it's basically eat as much food as you need to maintain your body's metabolism, and also have it be mostly from whole foods. So I think the biggest problem in our diets today is basically how processed food companies have kind of taken over the American diet. So the vast majority of the American diet is actually ultra-processed foods, which aren't real foods. They're manufactured in a factory, and they are created to be very tasty, very addictive, and they provide very little nutrition. So I think if you just focus on sleeping enough, moving your body, and eating mostly whole foods, you will be 99% of the way there.
Yes, you should choose healthy foods. The recommendation for whole foods is not an advertisement for a certain supermarket. It's that we want you to be eating things that are actually not going to last forever, meaning like a vegetable or a fruit, grains. When you're going to make any kind of change to improve your health, the question that I start with and stick with my patients is, why are you looking to make this change? And the question gets very deep very quickly. What's your purpose? What's your mission? What's your aspirations? Are making these changes going to get you there? Is changing your diet going to make you happy? Maybe, but we want to go back to, what's your purpose on the planet? And is any of these changes worth it? Once I know why you might want to make a change, now you're going to stick with it much more than, I heard this podcast, I read this book. That's not enough to sustain the change.
When I was growing up, Jessie, the only reason I ever went on any diet was to lose weight. I always wanted to be like 10 or 15 pounds thinner. And it led to some of the unhealthiest eating behaviors I have ever done, and also my unhealthiest weight. Just in general, my worst health overall was because I was making all the decisions I was to lose weight. And so I think that's why the message of having a good why is so important, because when I really dug down into it, it wasn't that I just wanted to be 10 pounds skinnier. I thought that I would like myself and I would be confident if I were 10 pounds skinnier, which is not the case, obviously. So I think really figuring out why you want to make the changes you make will make all the difference in your long-term success.
So how did we get to where we are today, where there's such a huge industry around diet and exercise, and we're just being bombarded with different options, and I guess in some cases, questionable methods for weight loss?
So the history of dieting is actually quite long. It goes back hundreds of years. And interestingly enough, it started off with men. So dieting was seen as a very male activity. It was a way for men to kind of assert control over their bodies, and they were seen as very disciplined, whereas it was seen as very feminine for women to kind of be more plump. And so it started off as a very manly thing. And so when women started dieting, it actually was the women feminist movement. So it was women saying, like, we have just as much control over our bodies as men do. And as women started to be more and more out of the house and into the workplace, exercise also became more popular with women. The more boyish, kind of athletic, toned body also became more popular. And so we saw this transition to women. I don't know what happened, in the sense that I feel like it went way farther with women than it ever went with men, because ever since the 1900s, the average female body in media has basically been getting smaller and smaller. Like, the waist to hip ratio has stayed at its lowest that it's ever been in the past 100 years. For about 50 years now. So I think it just kind of went too far, and it's unclear if it's just because, is there just something about, like, women prefer a thinner, slimmer body than men do? I don't know. But it is, I think, very, very perpetuated by media, because we see when thinner bodies are more popular in media, rates of eating disorders go up in the population. And when the more voluptuous body is popular in media, rates of eating disorders go down.
The quick story on the history of exercise is that we've always moved our bodies in order to hunt and gather and to take care of each other over the millennia. It's only in the last number of years where being sedentary for work and having food available, and say in the last 150 years, as the agricultural supply has been industrialized, now we had to create artificial ways of moving our bodies. So that's where sort of the industry of exercise came up. The roots come after World War II, when we looked around, and I think it was President Eisenhower who noted that the youth were not as vibrant as they had been before. And just for military readiness, we needed to make sure that people were exercising more. So the history of exercise and the science of it only goes back to about the 1950s.
So how do you know what's the best plan for you when it comes to exercise? How do you pick the best routine, and how do you pick a routine that you can actually start and keep up with?
I'll give you the medical answer real quickly. If we were to prescribe exercise, we would talk about frequency, intensity, time, and type. The frequency is every day if you can do it, but let's say 5 days per week. The time, maybe 30 minutes, and this is cardiovascular. The intensity, you don't have to sweat and be out of breath, although you could work vigorously. The type is, which is what you're asking about. I'll say really simply, whatever the person's going to do, that's going to be the best exercise for them. We could start tweaking and say, well, maybe, you can do more than just walk. Let's lift weights. You can do more than just lift weights. Let's add in some walking and balance it out a bit.
From our perspective in the book, we do focus a lot on resistance training. I do have to say I come into it with a little bit of a personal bias because I love it so much, but also just scientifically speaking, resistance training is so important for people, and especially women, because it prevents muscle loss as we age. So one of the biggest things that is the reason our metabolism, quote unquote, slows down as we age is because we're actually losing muscle and moving around less. And that really starts to accelerate in your 30s, 40s, and 50s. And if you do resistance training, which is anything that applies resistance to your muscles, so it could be going to the gym, it could be yoga, it could be Pilates, then you actually stop that muscle loss from happening, and you'll be able to curb some of that metabolic slowdown that people so often experience as they age. And it's really important for weight loss and weight loss maintenance, because if you have higher muscle mass, you maintain that higher metabolism. So it's easier for you to maintain your weight loss.
I was going to ask about how metabolisms work. I was always told growing up that I had a faster than usual metabolism, and I would get a lot of cracks from people being like, enjoy that while you can. But is that really a thing? Is everyone's metabolism different? When does it actually start slowing down? And I guess, how does this all factor into your health?
So metabolism is extremely individual. When they look at people, I think it was a 5,000 person study, the range of people's metabolism of the exact same size, some people would burn 2,000 calories more per day, and they're the exact same size as the other person. So there is an individual component for metabolism, but the majority of it is actually controlled by your body size, and the majority of that by your muscle mass. So a bigger person is just going to need more calories because they are larger, and a smaller person is going to need less calories because they're smaller. But in terms of metabolic slowdown, they actually just published a massive study looking at babies who were a few weeks old all the way up to 90-year-olds to study human metabolism. And it turns out that the metabolic rate does not slow down at all in your 20s, your 30s, your 40s, or your 50s. It actually only starts to slow down in your 60s. And I know everyone listening is like, there is no way that's true. I know for a fact I could eat so much more in my 20s and I didn't gain weight. This is a lie. And that is actually because people do burn less calories as they get older, but it's because they are losing muscle mass and it's because they are moving around less. So if you think back to yourself when you were younger, you were moving around probably a lot more. And because you're moving around a lot more, you also had higher muscle mass. And that is why your metabolism was higher then. So if you institute some resistance training and try to maintain your activity levels through your 30s, 40s, and 50s, there is no reason why you should see any metabolic slowdown whatsoever.
That's really interesting. When it comes to the things that we eat, you mentioned that one of the biggest problems today is how processed our food is. My boyfriend is a notorious label reader. He will read the entire back of that box. But I'm always confused, what are the red flags that you should be looking out for on those nutrition labels?
So if it's, if it is made in a plant, like a factory, as opposed to a plant, that's your first clue. If it's something that won't spoil, famously, people joke about you could have a Twinkie from 12 years ago and it's about the same. That's another clue. The other thing is that if the food has been designed to be addictive, meaning that it's got sugar and sweet and fat all wrapped together, which you don't find in nature, but you do find in a Dorito, that's another clue.
Okay, so let's just stick to whole foods. Well, thank you both so much for joining me today. When it comes to this new book of yours by the same name, how can readers use that to actually start identifying their goals and working towards them?
I think the best part about this book is that you learn exactly how your body works so that you can make your own decisions as informed as possible. So when I was in college, I was a sucker for anything that promised me what I wanted to hear. I would see people who did master cleanses and they would lose weight. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's what I need to do. And then I would see so-and-so is publicizing a waist trainer and be like, oh, that's what I need to do. I was looking for this magical solution. It's because I didn't really understand the way that metabolism worked. And in this book, we tried to lay it out step by step, so carefully. All the citations are there so that when you are making decisions about what exercise plan to follow or what product to buy, you become a professional BS detector and you actually know this is not real or this actually has some scientific backing to it. So I really feel like we're trying to make our readers scientists in a way and an informed critic of health and fitness products.
Our goal, and people have report that this is working, is that they can reach peace, that they can understand the limits of how much you're going to lose, how much muscle you can gain. By getting to a place of peace, the stress reduces, your life becomes a lot better. And that's sort of what we're looking for. It's not, again, a diet book, but it's about how your body works and how you can be happier and healthier.
Juna, Gjata, and Dr. Edward Phillips are the hosts of the podcast Food We Need to Talk. It's produced by PRX, and you can find it wherever you get your podcasts. Their book, Food We Need to Talk, the science-based, humor-laced last word on eating, diet, and making peace with your body, is out now through St. Martin's Press. You can learn more at foodweneedtotalk.com. Juna and Dr. Phillips, thanks for coming on.
Thank you
so much, Jesse.
When it comes to incorporating more whole foods and produce in your diet, sometimes it can be hard to figure out where to start. I don't know about you, but my mind just sort of defaults to, well, I guess I should eat more salads. But in general, I've never been particularly excited about salads, so I don't incorporate them too much in my day-to-day meals. As our next guest will tell us, though, there's a whole world of food out there that you can combine in any number of ways. Healthy eating does not have to limit you to a salad. Marisa Moore is a registered dietitian from Atlanta, Georgia, who takes what she calls a plant-forward approach to food. Her first cookbook, called The Plant Love Kitchen, an easy guide to plant-forward eating, offers more than 75 colorful recipes ranging from fully loaded breakfast cookies to one-skillet spinach and mushroom lasagna, all made with whole foods like vegetables, fruits, whole grains, legumes, and nuts. Moore stresses all of her recipes are adaptable and easy to turn into a vegan option if you so please. But despite the title, The Plant Love Kitchen is not a vegan or vegetarian cookbook. Moore tells our associate producer, Jody Cowan, that her diet is more flexitarian.
The whole goal with the book is just to ease people into the idea of adding more plants. I am very flexible in the approach and saying, hey, maybe add a little vegetable here, add a little fruit there, swap this or that out. And it's not a situation where you feel like you have to overhaul your diet overnight. And maybe you never get to the point where you're only eating plants, and that's perfectly fine. Even if you make a small change, I think it'll make a difference.
What are some of the initial benefits to having a more plant-forward diet?
I would say that some of the main benefits would be the reduction in the risk for certain chronic diseases. So most of the studies point to a lower risk for heart disease, which we know is the number one cause of death in the United States, a lower risk for diabetes and certain cancers. But when we add more vegetables, more produce to the plate, it also helps to improve gut health, right? So getting that extra fiber can help to boost our healthy bacteria in the gut, which also has some positive benefits on our entire well-being. So there's a ton of different benefits. Also, most of the time you save money because beans are a lot less expensive than steak.
How did you develop your unique food culture that you showcase in the Plant Love Kitchen?
Well, that's a good question. I would say I've taken an approach of bringing in influences and inspirations from a lot of different places. Some of it is Southern, like I have the shrimp succotash dish in there that I grew up eating succotash, with the corn, okra, and butter beans and tomato. But the shrimp takes it to an entree level, right? So there's a little bit of that. The crispy okra is another one. I love okra, but it comes from all over. Some of it is trending things that I've seen over the last few years that I started to adapt to make it work at home. But for every recipe, it was really important for me to think about how easy it would be. Is it something that people could practically do on a weeknight? Because I find that, at least right now, people are not really interested in long-winded recipes, things that are going to keep you in the kitchen for a really long time. We have a lot going on. So that was really at the forefront of my mind for all of the recipes. And then also making sure it's nutritionally balanced. But with the mushroom ricotta toast, for example, one of the things that I share with that one is, okay, you're just really sauteing mushrooms and then you're putting it over ricotta. Is super simple, but you could always do a vegan ricotta too, right? So I kind of thought, okay, well, how can I make this recipe, one, approachable, but also how can someone easily make it vegan if they're on that journey? So it was important for it to be flexible, practical, and approachable.
Do you have a favorite recipe, or did a favorite emerge in the process of making the book?
Yeah, so when I think about the recipe tester, it was a chef and his family, and then we had the people on set for the photo shoot. And one of the ones that was really popular, the cherry almond crisp, was really popular because the top of it kind of cooks up, has a little bit of a cookie-like essence to it. It's very crisp, almost like a sugar cookie. So that was a fun one. Believe it or not, super simple. The frittata was another really popular one with the olives and the roasted tomatoes and arugula. It was super simple, but one that was really popular. The miso glazed sweet potatoes, because they're a little bit salty, a little bit sweet. Everybody just kind of kept walking by and grabbing those. So those were some of the ones that kind of stick out as the most popular recipes that have so far kind of gotten feedback about. And that was kind of fun to see in real time.
Most of the food you present in Plant Love Kitchen can be enjoyed by just about everyone. Any advice specifically for parents like myself who sometimes struggle when introducing a healthier plant-forward meal to children?
Yeah, so the one recipe that really comes to mind for a couple reasons, the sheet pan fish fajitas, I think is a great family meal for a couple reasons. It's really flexible. So if your kids are not in one, I use cod in the recipe. So that's a really bland, sort of versatile fish that most people like. It's really colorful, and they can kind of play around with it, right? So you can add different toppings to it, kind of treat it like a fajita bar, but you also have the option to make it vegan or play around with the protein. So if your kids really prefer chicken, you could do that as well. You can kind of play around with that. But the second reason I really like that recipe is because it is easy. It's one of those sort of hands-off ones. Once you have everything in the oven, you can kind of walk away for a little bit and get the kids settled or whatever needs to happen and come back to it. So that one is one that I would probably start with because it does have that flexibility there. And then, one of the other ones, I think whenever you have a family, thinking ahead is always helpful. So I do have these for breakfast, these fully loaded breakfast cookies that I think are really popular with people. That recipe came from a 3-ingredient breakfast recipe I have on my website that was really popular. I published it way back in 2016. But what I noticed is that people were adding things to the recipe. So I decided to bump it up. And that one is good because you can make them any size you want. It's a vegan cookie, high in protein and fiber, but it's got like crunchy sunflower seeds. You can use dried cranberries or your favorite raisins or any other dried fruit. And they're great because you can make them ahead and eat them either warm or enjoy them on the go, room temperature. So I think that's another really good one. And if your kids are old enough, they can even help put them together, which I find when you get kids involved, they sometimes have a little bit more of a stake and they decide, okay, well, I guess I'll try them.
When consuming more plants and produce, I often think of the pesticides used in the growing process. Are there best practices you recommend for safely cleaning food before cooking it?
The recommendation is to make sure that you rinse your produce thoroughly. You can rub certain ones like your bell peppers, with just taking hand action and rubbing them under cool running water. That's going to be the best approach to making sure that your produce is as clean and safe as possible. The big thing to keep in mind, though, is that most of us are just not getting any produce at all or not enough. So the one thing that I like to caution people on is being so worried about choosing organic only that they can't afford it. There's definitely still a benefit to having conventionally grown produce, and that should be the top of mind. Just rinse it really well. And then, certain ones like bananas and things with a peel are a little less of a concern, but just make sure that you're rinsing it very well and rubbing wherever you can.
What are a few solid food staples, Plant Love Kitchen must-haves, if you will, that everyone looking to boost their produce intake should have handy?
Yeah, so the first thing to come to mind would be any type of beans, pulses, or chickpeas, and particularly canned ones. And sometimes people are bothered when I say that as a dietitian. They're like, well, shouldn't I be making them fresh? You can, but a lot of people don't have time to do that. And the thing is, the ones that are in the can, they've been cooked for you. You can get rid of about 40% of the sodium just by rinsing them. And they make for a lot of convenient meals. So having a stash of those is really important. And if you want to put them in the pressure cooker or on top of the stove, absolutely do that. That's a less expensive way to prepare them, and you can keep them in the freezer. They work just fine. So either way, but having those on hand is probably number one. The next one is sort of along the same lines in that I think you should have a really good stash of frozen vegetables and fruits in your freezer. So there's an idea that everything has to be fresh, and I love fresh produce, right? But sometimes it's expensive and sometimes it's not available. Like, I don't want you to buy blueberries in October because they are not in season and they're not going to taste very good. So having frozen blueberries is an affordable way to have those nutrients available to you at any time. So that's two. And you can stock up on them anytime. And then let's see. Maybe, whatever your favorite grain might be, so that you're getting, it could be oats or farro or rice, like whatever your favorite is, making sure that you have those at any time and you'll be able to make a meal with any of those.
as a Black woman from the South, was there any pressure to lean into or stay away from what could be considered a soul food cookbook?
Okay, that's a really, really good question. I would love to actually make a soul food recipe cookbook. So that's not something that I would put off the table. This one is definitely more sort of general, inspirations from all over. But yeah, it's not out of the question that I would make that because that's what I grew up on. It's what I love. But I eat a lot of foods, right? So, my everyday life is filled with pasta, sometimes pizza, tacos, Thai, Indian. There's like all the different cuisines, and not all of that is reflected in the book, but there's definitely inspiration from a lot of different cuisines in there.
Marisa, thank you for taking the time to speak with me. Is there anything else you'd like to share about the journey to plant-forward eating?
Yeah, so I think that whenever people hear the term plant-based or even plant-forward is a newer term, and their minds tend to go towards vegan. And that's really not what this is. It's really a path forward, whether you decide to become vegan or if you just want to put a few more plants on the plate. And so I just want to make sure that everyone knows that. And my goal is just to help you add 1, 2, 3 extra plants on the plate. It's not anything where you have to overhaul your diet. It's pretty simple, pretty easy. And my goal is to help inspire you. The recipes are really just suggestions. But I would say chapter 3 is probably my favorite because it helps you to stock your kitchen. It gives you tips on how to flavor your food so that they taste good and get you all set up for a plant-forward life.
That was Marisa Moore, a registered dietitian and the author of The Plant Love Kitchen, an easy guide to plant-forward eating. She spoke with our associate producer, Jody Cowan. The book is out now through National Geographic at most major booksellers. You can learn more about Marisa's work and check out some of her recipes at marisamoore.com. Thanks for listening to this week's 51%. 51% is a national production of WAMC Northeast Public Radio in Albany, New York. It's produced and hosted by me, Jesse King. Our associate producer is Jody Cowan, and our theme is Lolita by the Albany-based artist Girl Blue. Just a reminder that you can listen to 51% anytime at WAMCpodcasts.org or wherever you get your podcasts. On social media, we're at WAMC Radio, and you can stay in the loop by signing up for our weekly newsletter, Airwaves, at WAMC.org. We hope you'll join us next week. Until then, I'm Jesse King for 51%.
I was every single girl, I was nobody else, I was so sure of myself. I was 15 and a half, he was a hollow laugh. And I lost my cool somewhere along the way. At night and down the hallway, I had to learn how to look away. I lost my cool